The following is an Operation Podcast production.
What's changed now, especially with things like fentanyl being out there and being in a lot of substances that aren't even like opioid related,
Right.
is the stakes are really high. So even if you're like, let's say acceptable, which is just so arbitrary, right?
And so personal.
So personal, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say it would be relatively normal for a 20-year-old in college to do blow on the weekends. Okay, fine. What's scary about it now is that could have fentanyl in it. So then here we are as an adult and those feelings start coming. It's like panic mode. I don't want anyone to see this. What am I capable of? I don't want to bring this around anybody. Right? So then that's where the isolation can come and someone just they need a freaking break. So if alcohol gives you that or whatever it might be, I think at that point it's kind of a matter of time. Hey, I'm Dr. Blair Steel, licensed clinical psychologist, and this is EverForward Radio.
Dr. Blair Steel, welcome to EverForward Radio. Thank you for being
you.
here.
Thank you for having me.
This, I think, is going to be a conversation that is going to help a lot of people listening, watching for themselves, but no doubt we all can think of somebody, a friend, a family member, a colleague, a coworker, past life, current life that has struggled or is struggling with some kind of substance abuse, addiction. And you're the expert. You work with people to help understand where maybe they have these addictions in their life and really help people accept that and put themselves on a path to rehabilitation, to working through that. And so I just want to kind of let the listener drop into that for a second and really go, okay, I have this person in mind, or maybe you, and this is going to be a free session. We'll say. You can bill me later for the hour afterwards if we get too across the line. But I think what's on a lot of people's minds, especially here in California where we live, is this evolving concept of sobriety. I think sobriety and even addiction or substance use, before we even get into substance abuse, has evolved a lot over the years. It has for me. And can you shine a light on this concept of California sober? What is it? What's going on when we talk about this? And is this just a scapegoat maybe for substance use?
Sure. It's really important to note there is not a one-size-fits-all model for this. I mean, people really have their own individual relationships with the substance, right? But to speak to California sober, think about marijuana, medical. Okay, so now it's really considered medicinal. There's some information supporting that. A lot of it actually. And for some people it really helps. And if it's, let's say, something like sleep or appetite or whatever it might be, perhaps for them, that works for them. So to speak more to California sober, you'll hear people in the recovery community who perhaps went down some really dark roads with some really heavy drugs. Consider marijuana to not fall in the category of the dark relationship with substances. And for that person, if that works, great. Typically, when I see people who've been suffering from addiction, the isolation, the horrible effects on relationships, functioning in general, employment, their health, their wealth, identity. Typically, once you're there, it's not recommended to start to automatically go to a different substance. You really want to have a good baseline of sobriety, certainly initially, right? For some people, and if they are very clear that marijuana is not problematic, which is another interesting thing to explore. What is problematic use versus non-problematic use?
True.
And if that's someone's truth, then okay, no judgment. At least that's my personal opinion.
When I think when a lot of people think of the word sober, we usually only think abstaining from alcohol.
Okay.
Right? Is that a fair assumption? Or do you think now, because of states like California, a lot of other states in the U.S., that at the state level,
Mm-hmm.
such things like cannabis
Mm-hmm.
are legal. I can walk down the corner here to a dispensary,
Mm-hmm.
buy marijuana, buy cannabis,
Yep.
or other states, you got to go through the medical card application and process. But, other states and cities even are going the decriminalized route, and even
Right.
some are even getting, I think, are legal with other things like psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
We're working towards certain things like MDMA following
Mm-hmm.
suit into psilocybin. We're probably a couple of years away from being, access to a dispensary, kind of like marijuana.
Right.
But can you kind of help us understand, I guess, a renegotiation or a new relationship with the word sober? Does it only apply to alcohol? Do we need to be mindful of sobriety with other substances as well?
It does not only refer to alcohol. I would definitely throw more substances in that, such as opiates, which is a big one, especially now with fentanyl out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really huge and scary. Even cocaine.
Mhm.
What's changed now, especially with things like fentanyl being out there and being in a lot of substances that aren't
Mhm.
even like opioid related,
Right. Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
stakes are really high.
Mm.
So even if you're like, let's say acceptable, which is just so arbitrary, right?
And so personal.
So personal, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say it would be relatively normal for a 20-year-old in college to do blow on the weekends. Okay, fine. What's scary about it now is that could have fentanyl in it.
Mm.
And you might not be able to, in an extreme and tragic scenario, live to talk about that or to just have it be some cheap thrill.
Mm.
So it's scary in that sense. But to go back to your question, things like psilocybin and MDMA, if we're talking about the underlying reasons for addiction, if we're talking about disconnection, if we're talking about low self-worth, if we're talking about just the real underlying core things, there's a lot of evidence that these substances help people attach to meaning and meaning for life and purpose and some sort of existential underlying, emergency or quest or just, some need, something to hold on to and give us reason for keeping on trucking.
Yeah.
Sometimes those substances actually help with things like that. So there's a lot of, talk about this.
Yeah.
And this is a really good topic and where it's really individualized.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who have had dark relationships with substances, who have the propensity for it, I wouldn't recommend that for this type of person, right? Who's just has the history.
Would you not recommend it entirely, or maybe divide it into, I wouldn't recommend it for recreational use or even on your own personal time, not in like a party environment. But what about considering in conjunction with therapy, in conjunction with mental health work, or working with a primary care provider of some sort? Because a lot of places like California, certain
like
cities.
Even ketamine's big.
Yeah, exactly. And I speak from a lot of experience, and my audience has heard me talk a lot about that. I don't need to kind of unpack that right now, but using ketamine for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy has been profound and provided me immense healing and attachment to, I don't want to say attachment, a better understanding and a deeper connection to meaning and purpose and happiness.
I'm happy to hear that.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Right? So like when I hear this and how real and raw that is, there is no part of me that could be like, no, right? But I will say, for someone in early recovery,
okay, there's the difference.
Okay, who basically is lacking in coping skills and the ability to self-regulate. If you go too quickly towards something like that, the likelihood of transferring the addictive process to that is greater, and it's super risky. And I feel like it also could rob someone in that, let's call it a year. Okay, also arbitrary, but let's just call it that. Let's say you're really trying to build the stamina, the resiliency to say, I can do this, I could feel this way, but instead of reaching for something outside of myself, I'm going to jump in the cold plunge. I'm going to meditate or practice mindfulness. I'm going to talk to someone about it, which is like, you're already breaking through shame
Yeah.
If you can even like reach out to anyone, a friend, a sponsor, a therapist, whomever it may be.
Mhm.
So all of these skills, these life skills that you can own that are sustainable, strengthening,
Mhm.
like I got this, I could do this, I could handle life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Truly.
Yeah. So you don't want to rob someone of those like building
Mhm.
blocks that I think are essential for long term, not
Yeah.
just like recovery, but maintaining it too.
Daily adherence.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. I know I just said I wasn't going to go back down my whole story, but just to kind of, I share a lot of my personal
Yeah.
um, struggles and advancements on the show and online.
That's so cool, Chase. It really is.
Thank you.
It
And
is.
it's therapeutic for me, but also that's the whole point of the show is to not just put anybody, you and me, up on a pedestal as,
Yeah.
hey, we've achieved this, we're done, we're pros. It's just,
Right.
this is a constant process.
It is.
We have wins, we have sustainments, and we have kind of some setbacks as well.
And that's powerful. I mean, just think of the permission that you're going to give people and even men. Like we
Yeah.
could talk about that. There's all
Yeah.
sorts of like gender differences
Oh
when
my
it comes
God.
to feelings and vulnerability and all that. And it's like, and if you can go there, I
Mhm.
think it really gives people permission to go there too.
Well, I'll go anywhere and everywhere.
I love
and so
it.
what I was going to say was, I think what gave me the most potential for success and why I felt so successful with going through these alternative healing modalities,
Mm-hmm.
such as psilocybin and ketamine therapies, was because of the years and years of work, like you were just describing, leading up to that, of finally opening up to myself, of
Mhm.
finally letting loved ones in and opening up to friends and family, of going to therapy, of
Mhm.
journaling, of personal development, cold plunge, all these things that
Yeah.
kind of give you the reps necessary to show that change is possible
Mhm.
through unique and oftentimes difficult situations, but all bundled under that safety umbrella of this is my intention going in, this is what I'm working on, and kind of reflecting on that as well. I started all that about 3 years ago, and up to that point, it was about 15, 16 years of that.
Wow.
And so, it takes time. That's what I'm trying to
Yes.
say.
And those are some stellar
Yeah.
building blocks. And it sounds like there's a lot of discipline and awareness
Yeah, thank
woven
you,
into that.
Uncle Sam, for all the discipline ingrained there. But I if we could just stay on this for just another minute longer,
Yeah.
because I think, and I was one of those people, before pursuing any substance, and I was like a teetotaler, black and white, like any substance, marijuana, anything is wrong, illegal, you're going to burn in hell. That's what I thought.
Okay.
And until I crossed over, and my entire paradigm of life changed. I think back now to, you can't rush anything and it all happens for a certain reason. But I think back to myself before, and I think a lot of people are there going, I'm in pain. I'm struggling. I've had a significant life event. I've lost a loved one. I am just lost in life. And even me years ago, abusing certain substances. I definitely abused alcohol for many, many years. And I think we might be putting off a lot of potential help, a lot of potential healing, because there's this barrier to, it's another substance. Can you walk us through what maybe would be a checklist or a litmus test to go, I am recognizing where I'm at is not where I want to be, and it is most likely linked to or not made better by certain substances in my life. But there might be other substances that I've been told or I believe can be a slippery slope or can be abused, but they also, I hear, have a lot of potential healing power.
Yeah. So, really trying to be clear on the intention and the motivation behind it. Like, is it to check in or is it to check out? Could be a good one.
Please just say that again.
Yeah. Are you doing this
Yeah.
to check in with yourself or do you want to check out? Right? Avoidance is huge. And when I hear your story of I was black and white and then I was like it almost sounds like you started to integrate.
No, I've been in the gray for like 4 years now. And I love
Okay.
living in the gray.
Amazing. And it's murky.
For me, yeah.
Yeah. But it also sounds like it was essential to get you to a place where you can go inward and feel safe feeling your feelings, right? So
Truly.
doesn't that sound different than like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm depressed, I hate my job, I like whatever that is, and I want to numb and I want to feel nothing, which is like understandable, right? We don't want to feel pain. Not to mention, and this goes back to like early childhood stuff, with our boomer parents and their parents, they were thought, and they did the best they can with the tools they had. They thought they were doing us a huge favor. This is a huge generalization, by the way. So not everyone in that generation thinks this way, but let's just like throw out a stereotype. So apologies, right, for the generalization. But they, in a sense, were like, felt they were doing us a favor by like giving us the like, you're tough, pull up your bootstraps, keep going, that thing.
Don't let them see you cry.
Never let them see you cry, right? And that doesn't work long term. It gives us this message that feelings of being scared or lonely or vulnerable or whatever are
wrong.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
So
wrong,
avoid
shameful,
at all costs. And alcohol works great for that. Like it's an elixir of avoidance if you think about it.
And for how long now it's been a legal elixir of avoidance, whereas everything else has been dubbed illegal. But now, look, it still blows my mind when I can walk into a dispensary here. This is legal in California.
I know.
Talk about a paradigm shift.
See, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And alcohol's been woven, since the beginning of time. Even like it's in our language, like mind your P's and Q's is like mind your pints and quarts.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Joe, like just have a beer.
It's literally saying, hold your liquor.
That's right.
Literally.
Yeah. Bottle up your emotions. Right? I would think that comes from that as well. It's just like, have a drink, honey. Like, it'll be okay. And again, I think that was even like a generous thing to tell someone, like, here's your medicine, honey. Like, you're going to be fine, a pat in the back, but like, let's not really actually go there.
Can you help us understand a little bit maybe of in the world of addiction, biochemically, physiologically, what is happening? I've always found immense value in understanding more and more how the body works to help me kind of go, oh, maybe this is why I do that, or this is how and why I feel this way. If I can understand the system, I can understand how to maybe get it to work more in my favor. What is going on with the biochemistry of addiction?
So we are basically built for addiction.
What? I wasn't expecting that.
We really are. Our brains are totally built for it. So it's basically, if you think about our behavior and what motivates behavior, we've got dopamine is a big one. Okay. So substances, most of which will give us that quick dose of dopamine. And it feels good. It's energizing. It's a positive substance. Now, some substances give you the rush of the dopamine. Others can affect the reuptake. So in other words,
what would be an example of the difference of those two?
Per substance. So let's say like cocaine, for example, can give you that rush. But typically the behavior around cocaine is you're really trying to get back to that first rush. So there's like this insatiable thing. I mean, you could think of like the mouse in the cage with the lever with the drugged water and the regular water, and you just kind of like hit it compulsively, right? So it is this pleasure-seeking thing. It's also, drugs are so self-reinforcing. So not only does it create the euphoria behind it, but it can also take away, numb the negative experiences that someone might be having, the negative emotions. So now we've got a really complex web of things that is appealing to the human brain.
That's very tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky, right? So trying to undo a behavior that is getting positively reinforced seemingly, right? Because we know that there's a whole like back end negative consequence happening, but maybe not for a while or maybe not ever for some people. At least that's like really obvious. Trying to undo that is not easy. And it really takes like the negative consequence, like the real, if you're looking at it with clear eyes, for people to stop and say, maybe I should like rethink this or scale it back or whatever. So we've got that. So the brain loves it. And the brain's also lazy. It's brilliant, but lazy. You do anything for it. And it's like, oh, cool. I don't have to do that for myself, you know?
Thank God for the autonomic nervous system. And the brain truly, to highlight your point, it is extremely selfish, but extremely lazy.
It
It
is.
consumes what, like 25, 27-ish% of our daily caloric expenditure, and it doesn't even really do anything
Yeah.
like other muscles and organs. It's just there burning, consuming, but will also will work to not work as much as possible.
Right. Right. And it doesn't take long for that to like compensation piece to happen. Like it only could take, let's say someone would like to sleep a little better and takes like a gummy,
Mhm.
right? Okay, and not too much time. I'm talking like a week. Being able to achieve sleep will be harder than it was before you introduced the gummy.
Really?
Yeah, and people will
Wow.
have like report dreams, and it doesn't take too long to like recalibrate
Mm.
that. But like if you think about the brain is always fighting for homeostasis. It always wants balance,
Mhm.
right? So let's say you take a substance and it kind of veers it a little this way. When you remove the substance, it doesn't go back here, it goes whack to the
So
other side.
it's swinging all the way back
Yes, it
beyond our kind of starting point.
exactly,
Ah.
exactly. So, like, people who are on stimulants, when you see them first come into treatment, there's a lot of sleeping, a lot of eating happening.
Mm.
People who are on the sleepier substances, so let's say benzos or opiates or just the more mellow
Mhm.
substances, they can't sleep, they can't eat. It's just like a total reversal of whatever the substance was doing. So it's like slingshots you back.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Is there a way, let's say in others first, let's say we really know somebody. It's a friend, a close family member, and we have suspicions or we're just, trying to better understand them, looking at their behaviors, what
Mhm.
they're doing, what they're not doing. Is there a way to the common person to be able to look at somebody we care about who we might think is abusing a substance or just going through some kind of addiction, to
Mhm.
kind of look at their behaviors, wake times, sleep times, to kind of try to understand their biochemistry to better get to, hey, maybe this is what they're using or abusing? Or
Sure.
do we just have to really kind of wait until we can flat out ask them, is that even possible?
There are a lot of tells that
Hmm.
someone's using, whether it's the communication that's falling off. Isolation is across the board a part of it. So typically you'll start seeing people less.
Hmm.
If you're seeing like, 3 a.m. posts or something like that, that would
Right.
definitely be a tell that that's unusual,
At 3
right?
a.m. on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
what's going on
So
here?
if you're asking like if like how you can gauge if someone
Yes.
is like entering the darker territory, there are a lot of tells,
Hmm.
not showing up for things that they typically would show up for, appearance, right? Typically hygiene or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, People will seem different. They'll almost seem like there's a vacancy
Hmm.
if you're with them. Now, if you're asking like how do you approach this with someone, that's a really delicate thing because they're basically loaded with shame, typically, and also highly defended. Like their defense, it's basically a defense mechanism, right? It's just a really tangible and messy one. But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
all have our defense mechanisms, and
Hmm.
they're usually really brilliant in that they really protect us from seeing things that we might feel is hurtful to us or
Yeah.
painful to
Yeah.
us. Not to mention, it's a subconscious process. So just to make it even like more murky, right? So not only
Mhm.
am I doing this, but I am totally unaware that I'm doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say if it falls into this like subconscious category, if someone's not ready to face it, um, threatening taking away the substance is like threatening their survival.
Mm.
So they will
There's
be
that level of dependency.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they will be highly motivated to either deny,
Mm.
avoid and shut someone out. So that's a really delicate process.
What about kind of on the other side of things? I assume here, correct me if I'm wrong, please. I have even been in had relationships with people where it seems like everything's fine. It seems like they're good. Sure, life is hard for everybody. We got our ups and downs, but you never would assume that they are struggling with something to that level
Mm.
that they turn to abusing and even becoming addicted to certain substances, alcohol, drugs, things of that nature. And then, unfortunately, the worst happens. I've
Mm.
had multiple experiences where people take their own life.
Ooh.
Or people wind up in rehab, or they're in the hospital seemingly out of nowhere. And you go, why? Like, you seem so fine. You seem so normal. What's going on? I never would have thought that this could be you.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the signs we can be looking for when we think everything is okay? Just to kind of have that general barometer on the people that matter most in our life. Maybe this is part of our regular awareness practice, or kind of just check in, or maybe now it's a good cue for everybody to go, all right, I'm looking at this person, looking at that person, how they interact with me the rest of their life, so that maybe I don't miss something like this.
Yeah,
Is that possible?
It's such a personal thing. And if people want to hide it, they'll do it, and they'll do it really well. Right? So it's like almost the message of how can you check in with yourself that this is problematic is a big one. And I would even like talk about that more so than our loved ones. Like, let's say how it has nothing to do with us in a way, right? It really doesn't. So I wouldn't want to like encourage some codependency need for us to control the outcomes, or for us to even want to control an individual.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking really, I think back to these personal examples myself, and I've been through two of my closest military buddies, when they got out, took their own lives.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And, anybody else who's listening, who's been there, especially anybody that does wind up taking their own life, I wound up going, what did I miss? I think back to the past conversations and the last things that we talked about and the last things that we did, or just, I should have reached out more. And I think there is that sense of control, but I would love to now look back to those situations and go, not what did I miss, and not beat myself up about it, but what can I look at so that I don't miss this again?
Yeah. So if someone's really struggling with mental health, PTSD, depression, listening for hopelessness, listening for someone talking about like they're unable to enjoy the things that they found enjoyable. Again, the isolation, I can't drive that one home enough, because there's usually a lot of that, and people are really in their dark space if they're heading towards even thinking of harming themselves. And if you're really scared, there's a lot of resources out there. Even just going and sitting with a person, trying to normalize the suffering, holding a space for someone to not be okay.
Right.
We can be really uncomfortable with people's discomfort.
Yeah.
We can be. So sitting with someone in their pain, even just like not trying to, are you okay? Or not trying to even say anything to make them feel better, because that could actually make people feel worse, because they don't want to feel that way. And the thought that their negativity, and I put that in air quotes, but could bring you down, can make them go even further into the shell, right? So
did you by chance see, there was a clip, I forget his name, but there's a really popular comedian, kind of has like a wild semi-mullet haircut, and he has a really popular podcast.
Yeah.
And it was a few weeks ago as we're recording this, and he had a guest on, I think an MMA fighter. And
I did see
and
this.
all of a sudden, the fighter something came up about, I think, his father or some kind of childhood abuse situation, and he just broke down. And the comedian, he did exactly what you're talking about. It was so wild and beautiful to watch. He kind of sat back. It's like, whatever you need, like, I don't need to say anything. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm just going to be here with you.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it was. And I think a lot of people might have thought in that situation, I have to say the right thing, or I need to comfort them, or I need to touch them, I need to hug them. But I mean, of course, it's going to be case by case dependent, but just hearing, I think, another man go, I'm here for you. We're just going to stay here. That was enough to let it out. And this guy, I think, just had this profound breakthrough.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I saw it, actually. Yeah, my husband showed me that clip.
Yeah.
It was so powerful, and it was so generous and kind. And again, usually when we're like, what can I say right now to cheer someone up, is about our own discomfort with the situation. We get nervous.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was able to just sit with him was profoundly beautiful. And I'll slow clap that.
Yeah.
All day.
All day. Do you ever see anybody, have you ever worked with anyone that is addicted, maybe not to substances, or is that just kind of where your specialty lies? Because I feel like now the last few years, well, everybody's blaming social media for everything, of where all of our attention is going, where all of our time is going. And to some degree, I totally agree. And I think it takes a lot more awareness and a lot more intentional practice to carve out time for that and to not get just stuck. Oh my God, it's been 30 minutes scrolling. Wait, where did the time go? Are we dealing with right now addictions of other sorts that aren't maybe substances? Have you ever seen it? Do you work with people like this?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Porn's a big one. The phone's a big one. Gaming is a big one. And like that 18 to 24
Okay.
cohort
Like
of
Twitch, live stream, video games, things like that. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You see it. Gambling's a big one.
Is it all the
These are
same
called
thing?
process addictions.
Is it just like dopamine hits of different sorts?
It looks in the brain. It looks very similar.
So someone addicted to gaming, addicted to porn, addicted to cocaine in the brain, all looks the same?
It's very similar. Once you throw a substance in it now, the psychoactive properties of the substance is going to affect the brain a little bit more, but behaviorally. So like the pre-use is going to look the same.
Meaning what? What is that?
So it's really important when working in recovery. Like when I'm at Carrera doing groups, I love talking about pre-lapse behavior. So like, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10 is like someone's about to use, right? So like they're feeling like at a 10, they're basically at the liquor store or at, their drug connection's house. And at a 1, they're feeling calm and regulated or whatever. A lot of like relapse prevention will talk about like, okay, so what do you do when you're at a 7 or an 8? And I personally think it's way too late. Like the ship's already sailing at that point.
We haven't done the deed, but
Right.
we're so close to it.
It's a matter of time at that point, I think, because now the brain's really firing off the dopamine and the things that are highly motivating to get to the substance. I mean, and not to mention, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. No.
Like at that point, like it's addiction lives in the midbrain. Okay. So like we're all born with the reptilian and the mammalian brain. It's all of our feelings. Our amygdala is there, our fear. We need that for survival out the gate. Okay. Addiction is there with that stuff. And it's the prefrontal cortex, which isn't developed until like our early 20s, that has all the tools, the ability to play out the tape and the ability to just like go through the checklist. Okay, now's a good time to call someone and to employ all of the things, all of the tools that we teach in a treatment center or that we learn over the course of time through experience. Once we get, in my opinion, to a 7 or an 8, this goes offline. It's almost like if we're super anxious, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, if you're at a really heightened emotional state, it's hard to recall certain things.
It's like we kind of not quite blacked out, but grayed out, browned out.
Yeah, exactly.
Some old college terms coming back to me.
Yeah, we get a little like, little scrambly when it comes to recall. It's almost like in an event, like say in a wild event that happens, like let's say some like wild, everyone's sitting outdoors at a restaurant and a car comes barreling through. You're going to get a lot of different reports as to what happened because once our anxiety spikes and our emotions and all of our reactivity in the brain is really high, this part of the brain is like, it's almost not needed at the point from a survival standpoint.
Yeah. So it makes sense that it shuts off.
It goes offline. It really, really does. So to talk about the pre-lapse, like I'm interested in what people feel like when they're at a 2 or a 3. What does that look like?
Yeah, what does that look like? What would that feel like? Again, probably case dependent, but
super subtle, right? I was doing a group recently and this one guy was like, I typically listen to like this alternative kind of music, but all of a sudden I'm listening to some gangster shit. Like I'm listening to some hardcore aggressive rap.
Oh, wow.
And he said that he noticed that about his last 2 relapses, but like way before. And at the time he didn't realize that he was getting a little slippery or his anger was getting to a point of dysregulation. But now that he knows that, like at that level, he can call a sponsor or make the extra therapy appointment.
Wow.
And start employing the things then when you're still kind of dancing. Like you could still toggle between your big feelings and your skills and all the
Yeah.
things that you've learned to help.
Two things. One, I'm going to go back to when we're at about that 7 or 8 you're talking about. Is it really too far gone? Mean in a biochemical standpoint, meaning the brain, it's already there.
I think so. The obsession begins. It really does. Like the all of it from a behavioral standpoint, we start to attach to this idea of a quick relief.
Mm.
And that's really seductive. Like you can't blame someone who feels completely, like let's say their whole childhood, they were like, if they were angry, they were given a timeout. They were like in their room alone, no one to sit with them, just completely overwhelmed in this fear that their big feelings are dangerous. They're unbecoming. Let's say that's like females get that one. It's like unbecoming. Males kind of get the like it's scary thing. But either way, isolated and disconnection is, I think, at our primal level, one of our greatest fears, right? So like, let's say that's our building blocks, like, and not blaming anyone, but let's just say that's like what a family decided to do with big feelings, right? So then here we are as an adult and those feelings start coming. It's like panic mode. I don't want anyone to see this. What am I capable of? I don't want to bring this around anybody, right? So then that's where the isolation can come and someone just like, they need a freaking break. So if alcohol gives you that, like, or whatever it might be, I think at that point, it's kind of a matter of time.
I think it's just a testament to truly how powerful and how automatic so many bodily functions are that we do not have regular conscious control of. We can drop in and become more aware of them. I mentioned earlier the autonomic nervous system. These are things that we can influence through moments of awareness, through meditation, through breath work, things to kind of disrupt that a little bit, or I should say kind of help us get back to our baseline. But it's such a testament to how powerful the body is, and especially the brain is when battling things as addiction. And even it reminds me of this, my old exercise science days coming out, learning about, in the world of nutrition, how oftentimes people's eating habits, eating choices are such a struggle because the body is so preconditioned and already kind of, I'll say, working against us. Someone who struggles to eat sweets or wants to reduce them, or just, a carb heavy diet, when we think about foods, even when we see them, we are actually already beginning the metabolic process of increasing insulin, of producing salivary amylase in the mouth to begin to break down this hyperpalatable extra enzyme. So we're actually already triggering a metabolic response before the food ever gets put into our mouth.
That's right.
And
this is the same
It's the same thing I'm hearing.
Statistically, overdose is more likely if someone were to use spontaneously than if they were to be planning their use.
Really?
So that speaks exactly to this. So like, let's say someone like busts something out at a party. That because the brain and the body isn't in that preparatory state.
Like a 12-pack of donuts, right? That's what
right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
With a special glaze on top, with a special powdered sugar.
It's super dangerous.
Jeez.
And you know what, Chase, too? I love talking about addiction from this lens because I feel like it's incredibly, first of all, unifying for us as people and shame reducing, right? Like if back in the day, this was this like poor judgment, moral compass. How could you? But, like, well, you started, can't you just stop? And like these sorts of things that aren't helpful and also just aren't accurate. Like that doesn't even fit to what is actually happening here.
Could not agree more. And to go back, kind of the second point I wanted to highlight was, for me, what I'm hearing in addiction, kind of like the analogy I made with nutrition, is so much of, I think a fair amount of this is wrapped up in behavior assessment, behavior modification, and going to, before you ever get to the point so that the salivary amylase kicks in and you either have the willpower or don't, you say no or yes to that thing you're trying to reduce or eliminate. In the nutrition world, what are you doing before that? Where are you? What are the contributing steps that put you in that position to have less or more choice objectively? Is that the same case here, too, with addiction? can we, by better understanding our habits and understanding the people, places, things, choices, small choices or large ones, getting us long before we get to that 7 or 8, is there power in that?
Definitely. It's so empowering too, even just to like be able to identify it. The self-worth it takes to even say, okay, I'm worth the maintenance of this all.
Oh, wow. I love that.
You know,
Wow. Yeah.
like similar to the gym, right? Let's say you're like, okay, I have these fitness goals. Once you hit your fitness goals, it's not like, okay, I don't have to go anymore.
Yeah. I
Right?
achieve fitness. I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And the same for mental health. Like
Wow.
some people have that. And there's a lot of like it could be expensive. It could be your time. It's, I love the telehealth that's a thing now. It's a lot more accessible. But for some people, if they have like a specific thing that they want to target, like once you get it, people might be like, okay, I don't have to go anymore. I don't have to
Yeah.
do this
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And that's not recommended, right? Because things are constantly happening. So
So
if you
true.
continue the mental health, you continue going to the classes or whatever it might be, the maintenance, I think that speaks a lot to our value.
Total honesty here.
Yeah.
I want to say something kind of at the risk of my own mental health. What I shared with you earlier about all the work that I've been going through the last few years in alternative healing modalities was to address the story of the show, the loss of my father. And about 3 years of working through that, I've gotten to a place that I never thought possible in terms of my healing. And I'm so happy for that. I'm so proud of that. Recently, and by recently, I mean the last week, I have had 2 of these extreme panic attacks, and I've been triggered in ways that I thought I was done with, in ways that I thought, to your point, no, I did the hard work. I went and got professional help. I committed to this mental health maintenance day after day, week after week for years. And maybe it's like, did I get comfortable? Did I kind of let my guard down?
Yeah.
But then to my credit, why I feel like a lot of this is top of mind and kind of why I've, kind of been revisiting PTSD and trying to better understand it and going like, you might have worked through it, but it's not done with you yet. Or, as long as I'm alive,
Yeah.
I run the risk, I run the potential of having things trigger me. And I think I was not aware of all of those baby steps leading up to these triggers that I've known that I've had before. For the last 4 weeks, I was sharing with you, I was traveling and I was around a lot of family, a lot more often than I'm used to. And it was also timing. It was extremely top of mind for me and my family. We went back home for the memorial of my dad's passing. And so I was literally with family that I'm not with all the time, talking about things I'm not talking about all the time at his grave that I'm not at every couple years.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if, this is maybe a moment of awareness for me, a call out for me of going, Chase, you kind of let your guard down. Maybe you let your mental health work, that maintenance work down. And in these scenarios the last week, they've been terrifying. They've been scary.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Luckily I've had some really strong people around me to help me kind of pull me out of those scenarios. But it's just a testament to, I think, what I'm hearing in our conversation, just how powerful and how one-tracked our minds and our bodies can be if we're not aware of a slippery slope that we might be on.
And Chase, you're human. You're human, right? You're
Yeah.
not a machine. This is really real and raw. And I would hope you could be gentle with yourself and not judge this as a setback.
This round I am, absolutely.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's humbling, it's grounding in a way. And I'm glad that you're seeing it this way rather than like, again, judging it as a regression in your personal development. I mean, what you described was like a recipe for
Yeah.
emotional rawness,
Yeah.
right? Even being around our families are a system. We adapted, we have a role in the system. Some of it we're aware of, some of it we're not, right? So to even just like be around family can get us into a regressed state just naturally.
How many people are probably nodding their head to that?
Big time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So enough about me and my feelings. Let's move on to maybe some treatment modalities.
Yeah, sure.
So we've got a great foundation of what is going on mentally, physiologically in addiction and substance abuse. We want to get better. I understand that you've researched or have something really cool to share in the world of genetic testing that can really maybe help put us on a quicker path.
Definitely. Yes. So substance abuse and substance use can really be viewed through the lens as a symptom. It's a symptom. So if I'm at groups or whatever I'm doing, even in therapy, just to focus on drugs and alcohol, it feels like low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
It really does. Yeah. Like it's a symptom of some other thing. So I did want to share and make everyone aware of the fact that there are amazing genetic tests for antidepressants out there. So if we understand depression to be hopelessness, it's really what it that's at its core, what it is. There's all sorts of neuroanatomy involved in that, and there's more to it than that. Okay, but like if we were to deduce it to one thing, that's a big part of it. The process of finding an antidepressant that works for you can be discouraging. There's a huge menu of them out there. A lot of them you have to titrate up to a clinical dose. So let's say you like finally can come to a place where you're like, okay, I've been seeking relief from my depression. I've just been playing pharmacist or doctor to myself. I've worked through the denial of that or the feelings of vulnerability or weakness or shame that maybe I was programmed to believe that people who have depression are just weak. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you've gotten through, you're like, okay, I'm getting there. And now it's like you're presented with this gigantic, like diner-sized menu of antidepressants.
It's like Cheesecake Factory
yeah,
menu.
you're like, oh God, right? And then you have to titrate up to a clinical dose. And then like it'll be recommended.
Just to see if it works for you.
Just to see if it works. And then they'll say, let's stay on the clinical dose for 6 to 8 weeks or something. And people have side effects, weight gain, some sexual dysfunction, sleep, all sorts of things can present. And for some people, it just doesn't work. So then you have to titrate down from that and start another one. So if you can eliminate a lot of that process and just be presented with like 3, a genetic test, and you can Google it. GeneSight is a big one. Usually covered by insurance, not always. I think out of pocket would probably run you like $1,200, which is no small penny, but it's certainly a
But in the
great
grand
investment.
scheme of things, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And drug addictions are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
By the way.
Drug addiction, drug treatment. I mean, insurance or without insurance, if you stack up, let's say a year's cost of what it could cost you on a medication, you might be running pretty neck and neck.
For sure. And then it could even test for the gene. It's like, I think it's called the motherfucker gene. It's like MFR. I'm pretty sure, like, and if that was not intended
Whichever
for the acronym.
made that acronym, they weren't thinking that through.
Right. And I hope they were, which is brilliant because that's exactly what it is.
Let's
and that's when you hear
lightheartedness
about,
here.
the treatment resistant depression. Which is where things like TMS and ketamine really come in, of people who maybe don't have the underlying substance use, but they have this depression, which is a bitch, right? And it's really could really take you far from who you are and being able to function. I have a lot of compassion for that. And this is where these other modalities that we started talking about, maybe that's a totally viable option for someone.
Yeah, and as someone who has seen a lot in that space. My wife worked in psychedelic medicine for a couple of years, and that's exactly what it was. It was, treatment resistant is the term, right? Treatment resistant. And that was definitely, me as well. You've gone through years of all of the personal choices and getting traditional mental health help and traditional just help in general. And you either don't move the needle at all, or in my case, 12, 13 years. I'm like, come on. Like I want to be through this. I want to be through this. And I've done all the things. What else? There has to be something else.
Right. And in that case, I mean, I'm thrilled that there are options.
Yeah.
like that.
Well, let me look to my notes here. I feel like this has been an incredible conversation.
Yeah, cool.
I know.
And by the way, it was Theo Von who did the podcast.
Theo
it was
Von,
in my head. I'm like, what?
yes.
Yeah.
I only think of him as Mullet Man. He's got that kind of wild pseudo
He's awesome.
mullet.
And that was a beautiful and kind and generous thing he did for that MMA fighter.
So we kind of covered a lot that I came prepared for, but one area that I think is left open is relapse. What does relapse look like? Is it the same slippery slope, the same preceding steps that get people, back, or I should say off the wagon, as they say?
Right.
What can we be mindful of in the world of relapse to prevent it as much as possible?
Yeah. Well, back to that pre-lapse piece, really gaining insight into that, of what that looks like for someone. It can be a checklist. Like, let's say someone's into AA. I love AA. I think it's awesome. Simply the numbers speak for itself.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful fellowship. That's a whole nother topic. But let's say someone says for their plan, they've committed to 3 meetings a week. And then that goes down to 2. And then it's 1. There's some hard evidence there that, like, okay, I'm not doing the things for my recovery that when I was really committed to it, I said I would do.
So the reps of the work truly matter. The consistency,
really,
the frequency.
It really, really does. It really, really, it's the maintenance stage, right? And even like with what you were sharing personally, it's not, we don't say someone is recovered. People are in recovery.
Wow, yeah.
That's a commitment.
Yeah.
That's a lifelong, and I don't want to sound grim, like, you've got this for life, but like, let's just humble ourselves. Our egos want to be over it. Our egos want to say, been there, done it, I'm good, right? And want to move on, which I totally get that. But truthfully, it's something that we have to work at and not become complacent around. And then, like, stress. Stress sucks. Cortisol, talk about the brain, it like attacks the brain, it attacks the body. So let's say, someone gets sober in their 20s and then does their program. And then, once you're in your 30s and 40s and you're talking about family and mortgage and pressures, it looks different. Our brains are different. Our bodies are different. Sometimes we have to tweak our plan or whatever it might be.
A lot of times.
A lot of times. It would hope that we're rewriting the story, and I would hope that we're always works in progress. That's what I love about this field too. It's like you never know. It's like I'm like, I don't know shit, actually. Like there's still so much to learn. I know a little bit, but like there's still so much. I mean, even just the advances are constant. The articles are being written all the time. There's always research and things to learn and to reevaluate. So that process has to continue. So what else? Having the recovery community is huge.
Support system.
So yes, exactly. This is not something you want to like go it alone.
Does that have to be something like AA? Does that have to be a devoted, specific, chaperone, for lack of a better term, group?
Yeah,
or can it just be
not necessarily.
Having one champion in our corner?
It could be that. It could be that.
Even with addiction.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of the fellowship just for that. It's fellowship. It's like you're getting in a room with someone and it's like out the gate, permission is granted for everyone to be having a really shitty day. Like at the office, you're not going to be like, well, I woke up and I feel like shit and I'm this close to like having a liquid lunch, Sally. And she's like, okay, should I talk to HR about this?
I gotta go. Yeah.
So just the fact that you can be really real and raw in the face of other people is tremendously healing. I know when people work with a sponsor, it's like you're being reparented, like someone who just holds you accountable.
Yeah.
And like wants to hear from you on your bad day. Like they don't want to hear from you like, oh, everything's great. Like that's not what they're interested in.
Yeah.
Of course they'll champion that.
I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. There's the real reparenting.
Right. But it doesn't have to be. There's like smart recovery, which is a little bit more
what's that?
A little more cognitive, a little more brainy. There's an element of surrender in the AA community that not everyone's comfortable with. Okay, fine.
You're talking about like the spiritual aspect, kind of the
Yeah,
connection
the
to the
God
higher power.
piece. Yes,
Okay.
exactly. That makes some people squirm. There's a lot of like great acronyms to work around that. You know, GOD could be good orderly direction because that's really what they're talking about. But whatever. For some people, like even with California Sober, if
Yeah.
someone sits in front of me, like I don't want to lose them. You know, if they say like heroin's ruined my life,
hmm
but I'm not giving up weed. I want to reach that person, and I'll say, okay,
Meet them where
for
they're at,
now,
right?
fine,
Yeah.
exactly. Rolling with the resistance,
hmm
and I want to connect on that level. So similarly with aftercare and whatever community people feel like they're a part of, I'm not going to argue that, right? So some people are anti-AA. Okay,
hmm
fine. Let's find something. So smart recovery is another one. There's also
Okay.
refuge recovery, which has like a Buddhist undertone.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which
Okay.
is like a little more meditation heavy. Awesome.
Hmm.
Maybe it is someone in your life, you know. Maybe it's your therapist.
Hmm. In your professional experience, have you ever, or can you point a finger to a treatment, recovery, relapse prevention modality that is, I'll say, not that is without the spiritual aspect or
Yeah.
with a spiritual component? Have you seen one work better than the other?
You know, there's a lot of evidence-based modalities out there, which are great. And insurance companies love it, right? It's short term, it's measurable, it's observable, it has like benchmark kind of
Right, yeah.
things.
They're healing or they're not. They're getting better
Yeah,
or they're
like
not.
it's like kind of mapped out. There's stages of it. So CBT is a big one, and it's effective.
That's cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
exactly. So it's basically, you know, you have your thinking. It's a challenge within one's thinking.
Okay.
So if we can reframe some of the thoughts, behaviors are usually to follow, right? So it's basically gaining control of one's thinking. How can we reframe, rewrite some of the scripts that are in our heads to
Can we
help
just-
support?
Can we just call that awareness?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more specific.
Okay.
So
So would it be
it's
fair to
all
say
awareness.
Right, yeah, true. Okay.
It really
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
then like, and
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. Some of the, like, I'll have a group, the one I do at Carrera, right? So is neuroanatomy in the brain.
Hmm.
And usually the ones that like are like, I want to learn more about this. It's we'll talk about it,
Okay,
right?
okay.
We'll map it out. I'll draw a really poor illustration of the brain, but like the point will be there, right?
Yeah.
And without fail, it always seems like the ones that really want to stay above the neck,
Hmm.
really the work is kind of below the neck, meaning in the feelings and all of that. It happens
Huh.
all the time. It's like, okay, so we'll talk about it. We'll throw all of the neurotransmitters out there. And then it's like, I'm feeling in the room. I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, what are we not talking about?
Okay, well, that makes me think of the question, if, you know, and not to knock anybody's approach to recovery or however you want to take care of your general well-being.
Right.
Whatever works for you is amazing.
Yep.
But just keep in mind there are other things out there. And it would be ignorant to think that the one method that we have attached ourselves to is the only method, and we are covering all of our healing bases, all of our wellness bases.
Right.
That's my general disclaimer.
Yeah.
But let's say we are maybe more of that neck up person or the neck down. We're diving in. Okay, this is how I'm addicted. This is why I'm addicted from a neurotransmitter, neurochemical, biochemical, physiological aspect. And the more that I understand it, the more I can navigate it, and I can thwart it through nutrition or other substances, things like that. Meditation. There are a lot of different things you can do to alter your biochemistry without ever putting anything in your mouth. Versus the neck down, versus I'm going the deeply spiritual, only meditation, all the wellness retreats, are both approaches not giving ourselves the most healing potential?
Well, I would say we are all of these things, right? Like we are, as a person, we are multifaceted. We really are. So if we're going to be rigid and just go towards the one that we're more comfortable with, there's a chance that there's going to be other areas that are still not integrated into our whole full self, right? So like at Carrera, they really are interested in treating the whole self. And while
Great,
we have
great.
these amazing therapeutic modalities on top of it, there's a lot of self-care woven into the treatment plans for these individuals, massage and all sorts of
Mm.
almost spa-like services that can help people experience what it's like to get grounded organically.
Okay.
Okay. So back to the way that you phrased it, right? Like one
Yeah.
or another. And when
Yeah.
I say below the neck, I wasn't even speaking spiritually per se. I was speaking
Oh,
emotionally.
okay.
Like
That was my interpretation.
emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there's still a lot of avoidance, right? So like let's say we go really cerebral when I have all the things. There is a chance that someone could start exercising addictively, right? Like that.
Orthorexia is a thing. The
Yeah,
addiction to
totally.
healthy eating, healthy living, all the things.
Yes, like to a
Yeah.
point where it's like you can't even not talk about it, or like you can't go to a normal function because of whatever restrictions you've set out,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
can't go out
to
to eat and,
uphold. Yeah,
put the waiter on trial for every ingredient, anything
yeah,
your food touches.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's still kind of extreme in a sense, right? So like I would hope that some sort of balance
Mm.
and a little bit of, of everything so we can treat the entire person.
Couldn't agree more. And I'll even make this statement to wrap up this point. I think if we are more that neck down person of the emotional, spiritual, we're tapping more into natural healing modalities, wellness practices that I think a lot of people think of. I know that is going to influence our biochemistry. That
It
is going to
does.
influence the neck up.
Facts.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You heard her say it. I got the expert to agree. All right.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we kind of get best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we're nurturing all parts of ourselves.
So my last question before my last question is, you were mentioning earlier, talking about 20s, 30s, 40s, and it made me think about the typical generalized areas where most people are, I think, in their 20s, 30s, 40s. And I think a lot of us run a higher risk probably, and this is where I'm going with you, my question, in our 20s, late teens, 20s,
For sure.
for developing addiction to substances because of where we are in life. We've left home, we went to college, we got our first job, we're living on our own. We're living and loving life.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for many people, you wake up in your 30s and you're like, wow, I can't not have a drink every day.
Yep.
Is there a generational kind of benchmark for when we run a higher risk of addiction? And if so, what are things in those different generations, 20s, 30s, 40s, that we can just, again, introduce a sense of awareness for to make sure, hey, I'm going to have fun and do my thing now, live my life, but just be mindful of future self.
Yeah. So definitely the risk is high in your 20s. As I said earlier, we are born without our fully developed prefrontal cortex, which is precisely the area of the brain that's going to say, I better take a break because I'm feeling these consequences, or maybe I should moderate. All of those executive functioning skills.
That's up until age 25, right? We think
It is, yeah,
ish.
roughly, yeah. I think it's like, yeah,
Some of
exactly.
us later than others.
Right, right. And not to mention, if you've started your use in your teens, that's going to impact the development of the brain. I don't know necessarily structurally, but I will say emotionally, the development of self-regulation can get stunted at the time that you first introduced substances, especially if it was a regular and consistent thing.
Okay.
Right? So like, let's say what we were talking about earlier, that we start to learn the balance and the moderation and the skills and the ability to regulate ourselves through exercise, through talking, all of those things. If we haven't even dipped our toe into that pool yet, there's a chance you get sober at 25, but emotionally you're still kind of like, 16,
Wow.
17.
Wow. So it makes me think, look, whenever you choose to get sober is amazing.
Yep.
Right? Whenever you choose to take control of your life is amazing. But if we get sober too young, are we really running the most potential long-term for success? Is there an ideal age to get sober? basically.
It's never too late, the sooner the better, that's for sure. And we're talking about problematic substance use
Okay.
here,
Okay.
right? We're talking about like a process addiction that really takes us away from our goals, from ourselves, from our relationships,
Mm.
right? So that's what we're talking about. So if this is where someone's at, the sooner the better,
Mhm.
right? And also it's never too late. Like you'll see someone in
Yeah.
their 60s and 70s in a treatment center
Wow.
who like for the first time ever is like, I really should probably look at this.
Good for them.
Yeah. It's amazing. It really, really is. And things that come up at that lifespan. So like, life is still happening. And when we talk about these generations or these decades of our lives, they really are defined a lot by professionally, family planning, what that looks like, financial responsibility, right? Once we get into the later years, we're talking about potential retirement, empty nesting, right? So other things that like really our identity can be wrapped up in something.
So true.
Yes.
So
And where
true.
it's like, that's what life is. And then
Yeah.
it changes.
Yeah.
And adjustments are so hard. They really are. When you like have like 1 foot in here and 1 foot there. I see it a lot with the young 20s where it's just like, last year, no one expected anything of me. And
Wow.
and
Yeah.
now this year I have to like figure out what I want to be for the rest of my life. I want to like, now I suddenly have to pay for my car insurance, but for some reason last year I did like
Yeah.
all these
Dad cut me
things.
off.
Yeah. And it's really, really hard. And I wish, and I love these podcasts and just the way, even in social media, right? It's not all bad. The way that people can communicate with each other during these transitions and these adjustments to just normalize how freaking hard it is.
Yeah.
And I do think it's, as we get older, one would assume that we have more immunity towards this, but we really don't, especially as stress or whatever it is increases. Or a lot of unprocessed things. What we resist persists. So let's say we had a nice booze jacket on all through our 20s and 30s, just slaying and getting the raise and getting the promotion and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly slows down a little bit. And like, the things that we've been avoiding could hit us like a ton of bricks. So, no one's immune to this at any age, not any gender, not any demographic. It's like, have you ever seen these memes? There's memes that go around that are like, things that are classy if you have money, but trashy if you don't.
Oh yeah.
And like all these things.
Yeah.
So there's no socioeconomic, there's no nothing at all that will make you immune to this, sadly.
Well, as someone who is rounding out dry January.
Oh, same.
Yeah, I've been doing. Well, I had dry January all but one day.
Same, actually.
Okay, so all right, cool.
All but one nice date.
I love how we like confessed mutually.
Yeah.
This safe space. All right.
Totally.
I've never done it before for no particular reason, but my wife and I decided to commit to it this month. And I'll also say this: the more and more that I have gone through and maintained mental health help, and even through other substances, particularly psilocybin, I found emotionally, and I dare I say biochemically, I just have less and less and less of an interest in alcohol.
Same. I was like, is this dry January becoming like just the lifestyle, just like normalcy?
Yeah. We even picked up some non-alcoholic beer, shout out Athletic Brewing Company. Not sponsored, but I've recently found them and I love them. And I'm a big IPA beer fan. I genuinely enjoy the taste of alcohol, especially in IPA beer. I love bitter things like coffee and, a great deep, dark red wine. I just really enjoy the taste. I'm really over getting drunk or having honestly two, even that is kind of like, definitely over the hangovers and stuff. And I've just found that, now is this the slippery slope to becoming really California sober?
Right.
I got a great alternative IPA, non-alcoholic.
Yep.
I've microdosed this month, as well. So still using psilocybin. But that one night of having a couple glasses of really good wine I really enjoyed it. It was with loved ones, had a great time. But just the
Nice.
next day, I wasn't hungover, but it's just now I really, really know the toll.
Yep.
And just I have such clarity of this is how I feel when I'm just dial in, optimize, and great and completely sober
Yep.
versus even just like a little bit not.
I'm with you. I just even sleep a little worse,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
exactly. And this what you're talking about, and I'm like right there with you,
Mm,
is such internal motivation. It's the wanting to
yeah,
rather than
yeah,
like I should do this or I should do that. Cause that kind of like sucks, right? If
yeah.
we shit ourselves or
Yeah,
whatever.
stop shitting all over yourself,
Yeah,
as they say.
exactly.
We
Exactly.
gave ourselves the chance. We gave ourselves the choice and the space to
Mhm.
just commit to trying something different,
Yeah.
which is really all that it takes to get a fair assessment of is this for me? Do I like the way that I feel with or without these things, these substances,
Yeah.
or even just these daily practices?
Yeah.
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 So,
It's very
but
cool.
I do think, in I know myself, I do believe in true chase form. Come February 1st, I'm probably gonna have a glass of wine. That
Well,
is just
cheers to that.
that's just, I like to set goals. I like to adhere to them.
Yeah.
I'm disciplined,
Uh-huh.
but also I know what I like,
Yeah,
and
fair
I
enough.
have self control. So
Great.
I love that for me.
Nice.
But Blair, I want to ask my final question,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and bringing it back to the theme of the show.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insight and your personal experience to help us move forward in such a unique and necessary way
My
when it comes
pleasure.
to
Yeah.
thank you when it comes to addiction and our life and the
Mhm.
lives of those that we care about. So to ask you directly, ever forward, what do those two words mean to you?
Mm. I really feel like it is working through is to me like to really to move forward is not to get over, right? But to lean
Mm,
into it, to lean into the things that we're feeling, the experiences that we're having, and I think with that we can really integrate ourselves and continue living a life that's
mm,
thirsty for knowledge and not complacent, right?
yeah.
And exciting.
There's never a right or wrong answer. It's always my follow up.
Cool.
Every interpretation is your own and personal, and I appreciate my audience appreciates. Yeah. We're going to have all of your information and everything that we talked about linked down in the
Awesome.
video notes, show notes for everybody. But where can they go to learn more about you and maybe some of the things that we worked about for them or a loved one?
Yeah. So when it comes to the treatment setting, so Carrera Treatment Wellness and Spa,
And that's
I'm with
here
the
in LA,
clinical
right?
team. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So you can Google that for their website. You can find me at Dr. Blair Saidi on Instagram.
Mhm.
Same for my website is
Yeah.
drblairsaidi.com. And that's that.
That's that.
I'm around. I'm in the ether.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chase.